All right, so now we're actually streaming live. It's going to take a second for us to see it. So this will be like the awkwardness that's on there. I edited it out of the podcast.
Okay.
But for people who are hearing this now, the reason there's Pusha T in the background is because we were talking about it last night on Twitter. I didn't know you were a Pusha fan.
Of course, man. He's top five, bro. He's top five, man.
I
His
feel like his
bar.
name doesn't.
It's funny. He
I
can
feel like
rap.
his name doesn't come up enough.
Yeah, he can rap about the same thing every time, and I'd love it every single time.
So I remember when the clips first came out. You're too young for that, but I was in college when the clips first came out, and that's when I started to like him.
I know the clips. I was.
I
I
didn't
think.
say you didn't know them, but you weren't listening to it when they
Yeah.
first came out.
No, I might have been a junior or a senior in high school. No, I'm
Okay.
lying. I was probably like
No,
a
no, no.
freshman or a sophomore in high school when it came out because I remember listening to it before my high school games. I used to listen to Grinding a lot.
Yeah, that was it. Yes. All right. So we are live. We're gonna wait like maybe another minute to let this feed out and get some people joining us, and then we will kick right into it. And while we do that, I'm going to Google when the Clips first album came out because I think the Clips came out around 2000, 2001.
Lord willing.
Yeah, I think so. Because I feel 2002.
Yeah,
Okay.
I graduated high
I
school
was thinking maybe I was the end of my. Yeah.
2002.
Yeah. Yeah. Told you, young buck, you weren't listening to it when it first
Wow.
came out.
You're right. You're right.
All right. All right. Well, a history of the Clips and Pusha T is not why people are here today. People are here today to tune in to hear from you, Mr. Deane. So let me officially welcome everybody to the Advisor of Tomorrow podcast live. It's every other Friday. We're here 1:00 on the YouTube channel to talk with up and coming and very successful advisors about how they're growing their practice, what they're doing. And I've had a challenge from my friend Ashby Daniels, who gave me the final question that we're going to have later on to make a tilt towards really focusing on branding and marketing and how advisors are doing that. So that'll naturally come up in our conversation today. But the next handful of these are really going to focus on how advisors are telling the story of their growth to grow their business. So with that, quick intro on Samuel. I've known Samuel for, I think, a couple years now. Started out with one of the traditional Twitter DMs, phone calls, hit it off, really liked what he was telling me he was doing and what he wanted to do. And right away knew that you were going to be a great advisor, a good business owner, and extremely successful. So I knew I wanted to stay close to you and be a part of that ride in whatever way I could be. And then we met in person first time at WellStack last year.
Yeah.
So we had Zoom beforehand, but I remember being at breakfast with my wife and I saw you. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Samuel. He doesn't have the leather jacket on, but I'm pretty sure that's Samuel. So went over, interrupted your breakfast, and then, the rest is history. So, I wouldn't have had Samuel on if he was not a tremendous advisor, building a good business and have things to offer for the audience. So real quick, Samuel, I gave my intro of how I've gotten to know you, our friendship real quick, but give everybody your background. Don't go too deep into the details of how you got started because that's going to be a big part of the conversation. But tell us about Deane Financial, what you're doing, who you serve, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Sure, man. I always express my gratitude for you for answering that cold DM that day, man. You've been instrumental in my development, as a human being and as an advisor and a founder. So thank you for that, man.
I'm just glad you reached out.
Yeah, but so a little bit about myself. I'm a financial planner, founder, and CEO of Deane Financial. We're actually in the process of shifting the name to Deane Wealth Management. That's something that you and I spoke about before. We're an independent investment advisory firm that focuses exclusively on millennials and technology. And so my firm specializes in comprehensive financial planning and investment management, equity compensation, so things like stock options, restricted stock, RSUs, ESPPs, and so forth, and tax planning, just because those sort of things that I just pointed out has heavy tax planning consequences. So most of my clients are professionals in tech with stock options or some other sorts of equity complexity. Or they're startup employees experiencing an acquisition, an IPO, or some other liquidity event.
And a reoccurring theme on the show is having a niche. I always say niche. I'm trying to turn myself into somebody saying niche because I saw some Twitter polls going on of how everybody says it, and it seems that I've always been saying it wrong. So trying to train myself to say niche, but it's become a reoccurring theme and not necessarily with intention, because as everybody knows, early on in my career, I was kind of anti niche back then. But we'll get to that niche and who you're working with. But what I want to dive into is your beginning. Now, there's a comment that stood out in my mind. I think it was the first time we talked, and you were talking about your journey of, I don't even remember where you started out, but basically your comment to me was along the lines of, I was basically using them to get licensed to go out on my own, which I think is genius. And here's the reason why I want you to tell this story, and I want to bring that comment up is, so many people when they enter our profession, since there's not a career path, worry about where they end up. And very few of us are where we are today and are where we will be in 10 years when we first started. So I don't think you necessarily need to get hung up as a financial advisor finding the right firm day one. Find the firm that's going to give you the training that you need, give you some experience, get you licensed, and then you can figure out where's the next step. So in the whole game of things, as an advisor working at a larger firm, you're being used, whether that's for your contacts, whether that's for your revenue, like they're using you. They have, some of them have incentive to help you grow, but at the end of the day, they're using you to grow their business. Don't be ashamed to use them to get to the next step of where you're going to go. So with that lead in, tell us about how you got started in the profession, when that epiphany came that, hey, I'm going to use them just as much as they're using me, and I'm going to go out and be my own. Tell us that story. Share that with everybody.
Yeah, sure. So to backtrack just a tad bit before that, I sort of always had a desire to be a business owner in general. So, or sort of like, I always saw like prestige as being at the top of the food chain, if you will. And I think that, really stemmed from my mom's influence. So when I graduated college, my mom started a business that I started working in, and I was sort of a business development person. And I was able to sort of win us over our first few clients before we just, we decided that the business wasn't the right decision for us to make, and we decided to close the shop down. But it was really that experience that solidified that I wanted to be a business owner. And so I decided to pursue grad school to obtain my MBA. And that's when I sort of began working in finance. And when I started interviewing at these different places, the different firms and so forth, the interview would go pretty well. I'd kind of be uncertain if I got the job or not. And then they'd be like, all right, well, here's a sheet of paper, and they'd hand me a pen and be like, well, can you write down 50 names who would, become clients of ours, or 50 names who meet this, certain account minimum requirement? And, obviously, for the folks who don't really know what, the broker dealer side of the business is, I like to compare it to, rappers signing with a record label or going independent. As a business student, someone that wanted to start a business, that was sort of what I was focused on. So sitting down in these interviews, hearing that, yes, you can use our brand, we'll provide you with all these resources and those sorts of things. And in turn, you will sell products for commission, and I would be responsible for, getting those clients. It just didn't add up for me. And, when I realized that all the firms I interviewed at was relatively the same, sort of built on the same business models and had the same culture, at that moment, I really decided, okay, well, this is, not where I want to be long-term. Let me figure out a way and see if I can work in finance and do things on my own. So I did research. I found out about the Series 65. I took that exam, passed it, and that in itself gave me the ability to run my own business. But I also found out about the CFP designation. And that is sort of like the gold standard in our industry right now. And I realized that in order to get that designation, you needed to be working under a CFP and be doing financial planning for 3 years. And so knowing that, I sort of took the role at that larger firm anyway. Not really focused on the quotas, kind of getting in trouble for not meeting certain, requirements that I was supposed to, because, I really just wanted to take that time to learn the industry, be a student of the industry, and take what I can from it. And again, meet that, I think it was a 3-year requirement. And so that was sort of my plan: stay here, get licensed, get the 3-year requirement. And literally, it might have been like that same day I met the requirement, I gave in my 2-week notice and left, and decided to go out and launch my own firm.
And the end of that, getting trained and building yourself up to be able to make it go where you want to go, it doesn't always have to end up starting your own firm. Like I love when advisors, and that's a part of their DNA, what they want to do, pursue that goal and do that. And I would say, like 2 years ago, I would have encouraged everybody, go start your own firm. If you're not happy, start your own firm. It's easy to do. And what I've learned over time is not everybody's a business owner. Not everybody wants to do all that. Some people want to be an advisor. Like that's what they want to do. They want to spend their time, effort, energy, helping clients, building plans. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like there doesn't make you less of an advisor if you don't own your own firm. So I just want people to realize that you can still view your current situation I view it as a stepping stone. Like my story is not that different. I started insurance firm, went to a bank, went to a 403B company. And the 403B company really was when I had figured out, okay, this is going to be the place that catapults me. They're going to help me build my client base. They're going to pay and reimburse me for my CFP. And then when I feel I have enough loyal following, I'm going to jump ship and start my own. So it doesn't always at the end, but again, I don't think you want to go into every situation disingenuous and say, I'm going to use the company, but I wanted really people to understand, if you're not at the place is going to be forever, that's okay. Use it as an opportunity to grow, use it as an opportunity to figure out where you want to be. And if you can get that company to license you or CFP you or whatever it might be, do that. And then just know that that's part of your journey. It's okay. You'll find the right place in the long run.
Yeah, and I'll add that, as I was fortunate to have, a little bit of a network going into the industry. So I was able to at least survive the 3 years that I did. But, because the industry is largely based on your network and who when you have someone that's coming in from a disadvantaged background who may not know anyone that's worth $250,000 or anything like that, that in itself is preventing them from entering, this particular industry, because this is how it's built, largely in the entire industry. And so, that presents some disadvantages. And I was fortunate to be in business school and to want to start a business. But I think that if I was someone that, really wanted to work for JP Morgan or not Wells Fargo, obviously, but JP Morgan or Merrill Lynch or anything like that, I think I could have had a really tough time, so I think there are advisors that kind of have no choice but to do this because of how the industry's infrastructure is sort of set up.
I'm going to make a prediction, though, that advisors like yourself and Desarte and Emlyn, your friends, I think that I'm going to make a prediction that either led by example or things that evolve through your businesses, that it will become easier for people who don't have that network to get started. One, because there are people who have done it and have led the way, and maybe they create opportunities, or there's business models that will allow us to get started without having clients with high net worth. The subscription models, hourly planning, whatever it may be. But I look at, advisor friends of mine that are blazing that path. My guess is you guys are going to be changing that part of our profession. All right, so let's dive into this talk. I want it to be a lot of inspiration. You're 2 years into launching, so you're not a rookie per se on your own, but it's still fresh enough. You probably remember a lot of the fun times, the bad times. I want people to really get an understanding of what it's like launching and learning from the good and the bad. So when you decided, hey, I'm gonna be out of here once I get my 3 years in, I'm gonna launch out. How did you prepare? What were the steps, mentally, monetarily? Like, what was the preparation to going in and launching your own firm?
Yeah. So I think I used to stay up almost every night, like till like 3-4 a.m. in the morning on my iPad in bed, just kind of going through like my business plan and being so obsessed with planning and so forth. And then it just came a time where I just said, all right, well, we just have to execute. So, we started thinking about, things like why I wanted to own my own firm to begin with, and really, try to get granular with those things. what difference was my firm going to make, and how was I going to stand out compared to other firms? Why should someone work to pay with a 26-year-old Black kid at the time? And these were all some of the things that I was, sort of thinking about and trying to answer for myself, like.
I'm gonna pause you there. What was your why?
Um, I really wanted to just build generational wealth, for myself and for my community. I felt, and I think I shared this with you a few weeks ago, that, when this sort of whole George Floyd thing was happening, or is happening rather, I had a really tough time sort of expressing myself, like on Twitter or like social media in general, because, I just didn't want I don't want to give anyone any reasons to sort of, judge me or judge my character or anything like that. Not to say that I had, a different opinion than most other, Black people, but, it just is what it is. But there really just came to a point where I decided, because of the people that I'm working with and the type of impact that I want to have, that doing this is my form of activism. It is my way of giving back to my community and helping people from my community build generational wealth. And so I think this is one of the few businesses where you can do really good for yourself financially by doing good for other people. And so that really, sort of catapulted, my desire to be a business owner and to be in this industry and in this space specifically.
Has your why changed over the last 2 years?
No, I don't. No, it hasn't changed. I have it's the same. It's the same.
Has it become more clear, or maybe more defined? Or is it still the same? No right answer. Just curious.
It has. I think it's shifted a little bit in terms of how serious, I thought I was about it compared to how I feel now. Now I feel like it's everything that I think about. Like if someone asks me to do something and it doesn't align sort of with that, then, it makes it pretty easy for me to say no, because I'm just so laser focused on that goal. And, that seems like a macro goal, but, I sort of break it down into, different micro goals that I can assess every day. Well, how close am I to getting to this? Whether that's, building my firm or, doing, speaking engagements in the community, or just by, if I can tell there's a few people reaching out to me saying that they were inspired by something that I said in social media, things like that. That's sort of how I, used to, judge how close I'm getting to that goal.
Well, I want to go back and highlight something you said, being laser focused. And if it doesn't move you towards that goal, being able to say no.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody has followed me over the last few years, I'm horrible at that. I'm getting better, but I want to highlight that because that would be something that I would tell anybody. You learn that faster than it took me to learn that. Now, I will say that being all over the place and trying a lot of different things, actually, I think has worked for me and has been a benefit. Like, I think somehow I made that work, but I would not encourage most people. I think the more laser focused you can get, the better off you're going to be. And it will also help you, like you said, figure out what you need to spend time on and what you don't need to spend time on. So if anything, I mean, I know this podcast is going to only get better going forward. We're 15 minutes in, but if anything, if you take that away from this episode, then this will be worth your hours worth of time, just hearing that and grasping that. So let's go back to preparation. You've got your business plan, you've got your why. What other things did you do to prepare to launch?
I started thinking about, well, what services was I going to offer? Who's going to be responsible for what work? What fees was I going to charge? What type of business model I wanted to have? And I'm not sure if I actually shared this with you, but sort of how I came into launching and even getting into this niche. Kim worked in finance as well. Mm-hmm. And so our plan was to sort of be a power couple and sort of build the firm that way. And so we were, planning and we were strategizing and doing all these different things. And she ended up going to a tech conference called Black Women Talk Tech. And that's when she first, found out about UX design and software engineering, and started thinking, well, if this business is what we're going to build and the future of finance is in technology, it makes sense for one of us, maybe her, to go out and just get some experience and get some skill sets in that. And so she found UX design, which is essentially user research design, where the designs of basically like digital products is heavily based on psychology, right? So how certain colors and shapes make us feel, what makes us click certain buttons, and what makes us stay on the page for a certain amount of time. Those are the things that, she started working with. And I was able to sort of grab some of the methodologies from UX design and sort of bring it into finance in the same way how they build a product for a very specific user. I started thinking, well, how can I build this business for a very specific person? And that's sort of where my preparation to launch was focused on. And that's how I landed on working with professionals in tech.
And that's why you have such a nice website, is you get the cheat code. You got somebody within the fam who can take care of it. I'm a real quick. I just got a text. My oldest Roman is watching, so I want to shout him out. So, hey, Roman. And then also, if my wife is listening, you talked about the power couple. I long have been trying to recruit her to come join me and help take this firm to the next level. So I'm not the only one who thinks that way. But back to the conversation, and maybe that'd be a cool little, conversation for you and I to have as a video supplement to this. But like, what was it from the UX world did you take to finance? Because I'm very similar. Like, I spend a lot of time now not reading finance, but following and reading like the tech space, the direct to consumer space, e-commerce world. And I'm trying to figure out, the way they structure their relationships and their client service models and their marketing. Like, how can we apply that to the finance world? Because we're so far behind what they're doing. So I think like a prime example of that is Matthew Kobach. Like what he's been doing on Twitter. I don't know if you follow him, but he used to be the social media guy at the New York Stock Exchange. Now he went to a startup, and what he's doing is so great. And I'm like, okay, how can we take that to our world, to our business, to tell our story, and then the client experience, and make it even better so that finance has a new reputation. It has a new way that people look at us. So it might be a good spin-off conversation. Before I go too far down that tangent, I'm gonna pull myself back. So tell us about the launch. How did you launch? Did you work with a company? Like, what's the nitty gritty behind the actual launch process?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. XY Planning Network did 90% of the heavy lifting when it came to launching. Just because I had so compliance and the SEC was something that was so foreign to me as an advisor. That's not the space that you're usually, familiar with, because when you're, working at a firm, there's entire compliance departments and they just sort of tell you what you can and can't do. Or if you hear from them a lot, you're doing a lot wrong, right? So, for me, I wanted to really focus on my niche and focus on how I could sort of build the business to be even better. And so I decided to outsource the, registration and all those, I guess, if that's what you would consider launching. I decided to outsource that completely to XY Planning Network, and they took care of the launch and helped me get registered with the state and the SEC and get certain documents together and financial statements and all those sorts of things. So, and I would, recommend anyone who is looking to launch to look into a service like that instead of doing it on your own, because there's so many other things that you have to focus on, right? So like, for example, because I came from an advisor role and not so much a business owner role, I had a, pretty challenging time just figuring out how to operate the firm in a way that would energize me. I knew what services I was going to offer and the fees I was going to charge, but in terms of the infrastructure, I knew that I wanted a firm to allow me the flexibility to, spend time with my family, at odd hours of the day or whenever special life events happened. And I wanted to meet with clients at times where, they preferred, so, now I have meetings up into the evenings. I have meetings on Saturdays because I just want to be able to be flexible, not only for myself, but for my clients, And so those are sort of the things that I was thinking about, when I decided, well, okay, I'm going to go get a WeWork office. And so anyone that lives in New York, and I would have it in Midtown. So anyone that lives in New York can just pass by and we can meet in person. And for anyone else, we could meet virtually. And so like, even those things were part of the, I guess, building of the persona. We briefly spoke about, what things we can take from UX design and from the tech space to include it in finance and sort of make our industry better, since we're, behind on a lot of things. And that's one thing, was building a persona, right? When you're building a platform or a product for a user, you're building it for a very specific user. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to build my firm for a very specific person. And so a couple of things that I had in mind was, working with people who saw value in advisors that offered a virtual, option to meet with them because it wouldn't interfere with like their daily routines or their schedules. Someone who wanted, an advisor to work with from start to finish, because we were doing comprehensive planning, or that's what I wanted to do. That was important for me as I guess, a client need. Um, Someone who's very diligent with, saving, but doesn't have the time to explore other options, maybe. Someone has no interest in learning about finance and the different investment options that are out there, and they just want to sort of outsource that for someone else to do it. There were so many different sort of personality and character traits that I sort of crafted up to create this ideal person, other than, just being a millennial working in tech and, living in a certain place and having a certain salary or being at a certain life stage. I tried to get really granular with the personality because at the end of the day, at least right now, I'm not looking to build the biggest and the largest, most assets managed firm. Like, that's not where I am right now. I really just want to build a firm I'll be able to be happy in and serve my clients, 110%. So, you and I have discussed this where, I've mentioned to you that I want to, I'm thinking of sort of limiting clients at, maybe 100 clients. And once I reach there, just really work really deeply with those clients rather than working with plenty of people and just being low touch. I'd rather work with few people and be very, high touch and really create as much impact as possible. So like, those things are personality traits. I want to be able to look at my clients like family. And so these are all things that I'm thinking, and I'm trying to put together in a business model and an infrastructure that will reflect those things that I'm looking to build and the people that I'm looking to serve. And so that was where, I was focused on in terms of launch. And then, like I mentioned, XY Planner Network just sort of took care of the paperwork and those sorts of things.
I'll give another vote for XY. So I launched mine without XY and I joined. So I'm still a member. I joined XY about 6 months in. So I used a company out of Florida. At the time, it was NCIS. I think someone bought them by now, but they did all the registration. They did the client agreements, did everything for me. I would agree. You don't want to do that on your own. You can, but there's no reason to. But the reason I like the XY route is you get more support than just the attorney drawing up the documents and filing everything. Like, there's groups to help you figure out your marketing. And then on top of that, they give you the tech. So you're already paying them. And at minimum, you have your CRM, you get on TD's platform. Like, it really is a great place to jump on and start. And then they're providing the tools to help you grow and get better. So I do want to shout them out because I think if you are going to go launch your own firm, it's a great place that's going to give you everything that you need. And there's great people behind it as well. What was the time frame? Do you remember how long it took from when you signed on with XY, started down the process to when the SEC approved you? And I'm guessing, do you have to go SEC because you're New York? Is that a New York thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
New York is weird because there's no U4. When you search, even if you search my name, Samuel Deane, on broker check, it won't come up. You have to search under the firm Deane Financial to get the firm ADV, which is weird. I guess New York is just, I guess because they have no U4, which that's probably why my name doesn't come up. But I would say that it took, I'd say about 4 to 6 weeks, once contacting XY and, paying the deposit and those sorts of things. It came back pretty quickly. I remember like it was yesterday. I was sitting on the rooftop of WeWork, and I got a phone call and they said I was approved. And I was like, I don't even remember. I might've just been jumping up and down for joy or something.
It's definitely one of the messages that you don't forget. So the reason I asked time, it's all over the board. So depending on the state you're registering in, or if you're in the SEC, what their process and procedures are, it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a couple months. I've seen it across the board, but just to give people perspective. So for me, I can't remember when exactly I started with NCIS, but my last day, my last firm was May 23rd. Set up everything, got rolling. In July 3rd, I got an email, and I'll never forget it either. We were in Pennsylvania. So all of my extended family lives in Western Pennsylvania, and small town. So we'll go back for the 4th of July, see everybody. July 3rd, I'm sitting on my cousin's patio, checking emails, doing some work. And then I get the email in that says you're approved by the state of Indiana. So jumping around, excited. I started emailing clients because I already prepped them what was going on and let them know, hey, I'm in Pennsylvania. I'll be back let's schedule for next week and let's get together and get this ball rolling. And then I was off to the races. So I mean, I would tell anybody thinking of, if you're going to go the direction of launching your own firm, you've got to give yourself a conservative amount of time on the long end so you don't catch yourself. And that helps in, the preparation of, well, how much money do you need to bridge this gap? If you can't work with clients, how do you pay the bills as you're waiting for all this stuff to go, to give you an idea of what you need to prepare? Because that was one of the big things I did, was making sure I had enough money to start and then write out non-competes and all these things to be able to be okay, to give my business a chance to thrive without running into any troubles.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for me, I wasn't coming from another firm. So I was sort of starting from the ground up, 0 clients, 0 AUM. And so I sort of took that time of getting registered to just do things like build my website and figure out my marketing strategy, which both of those things changed dramatically over the past 2 years. But there are things that, you can do, as a new firm owner during the registration period, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, however long, that you can sort of do to prep. And that's, you can even, talk to people, put yourself out there, write blogs. That doesn't necessarily mean you can, you have to go out and solicit business, but, start writing and building a brand for yourself. If if you're using social media and that's part of your marketing strategy, those are a few things that you can get started on. You don't necessarily have to wait until you're registered to do so.
I would double check with your compliance people just to make sure that what you're going to be putting out. And the reason I say that is I didn't launch my blog until the day that the firm was approved, but I had started writing, and the timestamp on it was before my firm was approved. And the compliance team came back and said, "Hey, you can't have that blog out from before." I said, "Well, actually, I didn't publish it till today. I just started writing." So I was able to change the date. But there's little things like that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, depending on what you're writing about, I don't know if it matters, but just, I would say be careful. One of the things I did in the interim of leaving my firm to go to start, okayed it with compliance, I had conversations, coffee with all of my clients, not about not about their plans, not about their investments, but just more of a social, here's what's going on, here's what to expect. Now, I was in a fortunate position that the firm I was leaving, it was on good terms. So they weren't, fighting me or giving me a cease and desist, but basically just letting people know, hey, here's what's happening. I'm leaving. I'm starting it up. This is how long it'll probably take. While we're waiting, your funds stay where they're at. Just give them a prep and let them know that everything's going to be okay. And here's what's going on. So I would check with your compliance team, see what they say is okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk about, and don't get yourself in trouble. But you're right. You don't have to sit around twiddling your thumbs waiting for that approval to be doing things. Could be doing the writing and just building a catalog. So when day one comes, you drop 10 blog posts right out the gate and you're off to the races. Don't wait for those things. Do you remember any, emotions going through that process? Fear, excitement, uncertainty?
You know, it, it was somewhat weird because you feel as though, at least for me, I felt as though, yes, this is an entrepreneurial journey, but there's so many other people out there that are doing it and doing it successfully, that the fear of not succeeding wasn't really, I didn't really feel that. And again, it's something that's already proven that can work. It wasn't like I was going out and creating a whole new idea. I was sort of just taking a business model and shifting it to meet my own clients and my own generation of people that I wanted to serve. So the fear of not making it or not being successful wasn't really there. I was really excited. I was nervous because I didn't necessarily know anyone in the industry, and this is something that we've spoken about. I felt like my first year I struggled because I didn't really know anyone. I didn't really have any mentors or colleagues to go to bounce ideas off of, to talk shop or tech stack, or just even say, well, hey, I'm thinking about this versus this. Have you used any? What do you like or dislike? I didn't necessarily have that. So there were a few mistakes that I made, just sort of coming up in the 2 years. But you learn. I learned a lot in those mistakes and in those experiences. And so I'm the next advisor that I speak to that kind of comes up after me. I'm more than willing to lend him an ear, just to share some advice and give him sort of that guidance that I didn't necessarily have, and introduce him to the folks in the FinSuite space that I later met.
And I already sent somebody to you last night working on that pay it forward for you. No, I think that makes sense. And I'm like you. I think I consider myself an optimist. And coming into this, I know that not everything is always going to be successful, but I didn't see why I wouldn't succeed. And I always talk to advisors about like closing the gap. Like in that preparation, how do you make this leap of faith of going out on your own or joining another firm? How do you make it less scary? And it's the preparation you talked about. Well, knowing who you were going to go after and who you're going to try to make clients. That helped you with your business model so that you knew you had a better focus. Saving financially to know that you're not going to be struggling to pay bills while you build things up because it's going to take time and do all these things. And then it's like, okay, the only thing that's left is, can I get enough business? And that's not easy. And I think that's where a lot of people jump and start their own firms too early, is that they're great advisors. They might even be business minded, but they might not be good marketers. And marketing is something you have to be good at, whether that's content, whether that's shaking hands, networking, whatever it is. You've got to be able to go out and tell your story and let people know. Otherwise, no one's ever going to find you. If you're starting a firm from scratch, you're by yourself, you don't have a big brand, no one's going to find you if you're not out telling the story, which is a perfect segue into kind of your digital presence, which is a big part of how you're growing. You have a niche and that helps you. So talk about how having a niche helps you with your digital presence and your strategy.
Yeah. So, as a startup advisor, it's very difficult to sort of limit yourself to working with a very specific clientele, because most senior advisors will tell you that you should take any business you can, because it's sort of hard to come by. But I've sort of decided to do it anyway, and I think it's hard to say no early on, but from my experience, by putting out content that relates specifically to that demographic that I'm trying to serve. I mean, people who don't fit that mold will look at it and scroll past it and keep going. And people who can relate to it and identify with it will take a moment, pause, and at the very least remember my name or read the article or something like that. And so, for me, I don't want to say I'm not assertive, but I don't really like to chase people down and cold call and all those sorts of things. That's not really my style of working with clients or even building awareness of what I'm doing. I'm very much so like, I'll put my business out there, not business, I'll put my knowledge out there. I'll whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, and people that it resonates with usually reach out to me. And that's sort of what my marketing strategy is like. And once that happens, and that's sort of the top of the funnel of how that works. Somewhere in the middle of that funnel, I have a newsletter, and I would offer maybe a stock option flow chart, or I recently did an interview with Josh Brown on equity compensation, or I'll throw that in there just to sort of nurture the subscribers and other millennials who may sign up. And I have a weekly newsletter that I spend a few moments talking about some personal things and whatever I'm experiencing in life at the moment, how I feel about something. And then the rest of the newsletter is really dedicated to talking about things that are, again, specific to millennials and tech, whether it's equity compensation or what's going on with the company that they work for, if they're working for a blue chip company like Etsy or Spotify or something like that. And just really speaking about, things like home ownership. These are things that, clients that I work with are thinking about most of the time. And so being able to just nurture a genuine relationship and give them insight as to what I'm like as not only an advisor, but as a human being, and, as a son and as a future husband and dad, I think that allows them to really get to know me without even having to meet me. And so that even ties into the virtual aspect of the business, right? If you're going to be running a virtual firm, it was important for me to give clients an idea of what I'm like and who I am and how I think, so that it would make the decision for them to work with me a lot easier. And so that's sort of what my marketing strategy is like. And obviously, what I'm building is sort of a nurturing machine. And then when I personally feel as though you can't make clients want a financial advisor, you sort of have to just put out what and when they're ready, they'll come to you, and hopefully you'll be at the top of mind. And I think that having a niche and focusing on very specific topics that they may find pain points, whenever that time happens, you'll be at the top of mind. And that's sort of what's been working for me so far.
You stole my thunder, man. I was gonna say exactly that. Actually, and you mentioned Josh. I was gonna
Yeah.
say that I subscribed to it, but I remember Josh Brown on the Human Advisor podcast telling Tyrone, you can't force somebody to want a financial advisor,
Mhm.
but you can be top of mind, and that's exactly right. And I think the best place to be top of mind, having a blog is great, doing podcasts and videos are great as well, but the inbox, newsletters are something I slept on for a very long time. And I think that if you're looking to start and you want one thing, today I would tell you start a newsletter first and then branch out for a few reasons. One, the newsletter you own as the advisor. Like, these people have given you your email. You can take those emails and port them wherever you need to be. We're seeing, the threat of TikTok being taken away. If all of your ownership is on a platform that could go away, you'd be left with nothing. But no one can take away those email addresses. But there's also something, I feel funny using the word, but there's something very intimate about the email inbox. If I give you permission to come into my email on a regular basis, like I'm saying that's okay. I'm welcoming you into my home versus happen to find you out on Twitter or wherever it might be. So I would
Agreed.
say newsletters are very big, and you have figured out something that most advisors struggle to figure out and struggle to do, is to bring that personal component to it. I think every newsletter should have a little bit of personal, whether it's firm level and you let people see who you are as individuals within the firm, or if it's your solo advisor, letting people know what's going on in your life, because that allows people to relate to you. And that relationship through email and experiencing your life along the way just builds a stronger bond. And I think that when it comes to money and building trust, people want to know that we're human beings,
Mhm.
that like who we are. I see no downside to sharing your personal life in some scope in your content, because it's going to deflect away people who might not like something about you, and it's going to make people really, really like who you are. I never imagined that sharing pictures of the boys and having them on videos and in the podcast would be a big deal, but that has been a huge piece of what has helped people get to know me and like me. And I'm sure some people don't like seeing it, which is fine. So the whole point of that rant, newsletters are very powerful. I don't think they're ever going to go anywhere. I always thought no one wants more email, but I get more engagement out of the Advisor of Tomorrow newsletter, which if you're not subscribed to, you should go subscribe to that right now. But the newsletter I get more engagement out of than videos, podcasts, or blogs. The circulation may not be as large. I think there's over 400 advisors on the newsletter, but I'm getting dialogues back and forth via email where I might get one comment or one like on a video. So I think newsletters are very smart. You can tailor them, and then they can be very personal as well.
And to top it, to add to that, it's not expensive. If you're running a lean firm, you can, the newsletter list, if you go with MailChimp, is free, I believe. And what I use ConvertKit, and I think that's maybe about 20 or $30 a month. And it's one
Yeah.
of the easiest ways to really just get in the airs and get in front of your clients.
I'm a ConvertKit user as well, mainly because MailChimp changed over time. And for what I wanted to do and segment my list, it was going to cost me more every month.
Mhm.
But the nice thing about, if you really want to get into the email campaigns, you can start segmenting your clients and then beginning side, storylines off the side to nurture clients a different way. So, oh, you clicked to this article, that means you might be interested in this. Let me send you down this journey, and it's still going to rope you back to me, but I'm going to do it with things that you're probably going to be interested in, and I'm not going to send you stuff you're not interested in. So I think you're smart for doing that, and I would encourage you to keep it. And your newsletter is good. So
Thank
I
you.
subscribe. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a young millennial in tech, so I'm not reading a lot of the tech stuff, but I'm reading the personal stuff, and I'm also just checking over to see if I can give you any feedback. But that doesn't matter. You don't need everybody to read it. It's better to have a readership of fewer ideal people than a readership of a bunch of people who are never going to become clients.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And, you
What are you
know,
thinking?
I agree 100%. My newsletter list isn't huge. I probably have a little over 100 people, and I've been doing this for maybe 4 months now, for the most of this year, I would say. And it's not a huge list, but I get tons of engagement literally every time. And that's the reason I started including more personal things is because I had a few people reach out when I did include stuff like personal things, say that was what I was getting the most engagement on. So,
Mhm.
I just decided, well, I'm going to include something personal in every email and sort of see how that goes.
If I had to guess the way that a reader figures things out through through content, let's just take newsletter out through the content. They're going to first read to see, are you an expert? Do you know what you're talking about? Or are you a moron? Okay, check the box. You know what you're talking about. You're obviously qualified. You're breaking down this equity comp to a way that I can understand it. Let me see if I like you. And then I'm not even gonna spend a lot of time reading about the stock option chart, because if I need help, you know it for me. Let me just make sure I'm gonna like being around you and talking to you. So you need to have that mix. You need to show the expertise. You need to position yourself as the expert, but you need to let people determine whether or not they're gonna like you. And don't hold back. Be yourself. Like, don't put on a front, because you just want to, like, when it comes to work, you want to be who you are in your skin and not have to put up an act. So just be yourself.
Read.
Um, I'm glad that you came to the same conclusion as me. That just gives me confidence that I'm thinking the right way. Um, well, as far as you've got the newsletter, anything more that you're thinking of adding, and why would you add more to your empire?
So right now I have a newsletter and a blog. I haven't written a blog in a while because I've been more focused on the newsletter because that brings more engagement. And
Mhm.
parts of me feels like people don't like reading. So I'm like, all right, or maybe you can't really, you don't know who's reading what. So it was hard for me to really measure, is this successful? Whereas a newsletter, I can at least say, okay, well, my open rate is pretty high or my engagement rate is pretty high. As far as blogs, it's kind of tough. So I've been focused more on the blogs. We spoke about the podcast that I want to launch, that I'm aiming on launching by the end of this year. Knock on wood. But
Now you put it out there. Now more people know. This is on YouTube. It's on the podcast. Now people
I
know.
love, and I love it. I love it. Give myself more pressure.
I did
um,
it all the time.
what I really am focused on now is just figuring out ways. I don't want to spread myself too thin, right? So I would like to identify what are the most efficient platforms for me to use. And so I would like, I'm working on sort of just building out the newsletter a lot more in terms of email automation, right? Having content that helps people. So when they first sign on, I'm giving you content on how and when to exercise your stock option. These are like infographic sort of things.
Mhm.
A stock equity comp guide, something on tax planning, just different pieces of content that I just want to be able to continue to provide value through email automation and email marketing, and just again continue to nurture. So I'm really just trying to build my newsletter to the point where everything is sort of on autopilot, and I would like to have sort of like a primary platform, and then secondary and tertiary platforms that would maybe I have less engagement there, or if I notice that people aren't reading the blog as much, I'm not going to write a blog every week. I may write one every other week or once a month or something like that. Just trying to identify where my primary audience likes engaging with me and focusing on those areas, and not completely abandoning the other areas. So those are some of the things that I'm sort of trying to work out now and figure out. And I'll be honest, I have a lot of fun doing this stuff, and just figuring out what works and what doesn't work in terms of marketing. It can certainly be frustrating. Um, but I have a lot of fun doing it.
I didn't throw this question to you, but because I had this conversation this morning with somebody else, how, in this content game and owning your own business, being an advisor, it's very easy to look to our friends and our peers in the profession and want to measure how we're stand up, comparisons. How do you handle that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I think it's natural. And I think over time, you eventually get to a point where you get confident in your own skin and you realize, like, what other people are doing doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But if I had to guess, you're still early enough in that maybe that comes up. So how do you battle, trying to compare yourself to other people and judge your success based off of the success they're having? Or have you already conquered that?
I think that's something that I'm still figuring out. I'm actively trying to find the line between paying attention to what other people are doing to sort of get good ideas that I can implement my own way versus,
Mhm.
just looking at what other people are doing and saying, man, I'm not doing that. I should do that. Like just trying to, I want to be aware of what other people are doing for the simple fact of being able to identify good ideas and ways that I can, change those ideas to fit, what I'm doing with my firm and the clients that I want to serve. So that's still something I'm figuring out. Fortunately and I think having a niche really helps with that. Like if I see, you know, let's say like Desarte, for example, he has town halls. I'm not exactly sure, what his objective is that, but it appears as though, maybe he wants to get as many people as possible and sort of build, a bigger firm than what he may currently have. And I have no idea, but for me, I don't necessarily know if a town hall may be the best benefit for me. I love the idea. Um, I would rather do something like, instead of trying to bring audiences to me, go somewhere where the audience is already there, like going to tech companies and speaking in front of ERGs, right? And so that would be me taking that town hall idea and bringing it somewhere else where I would benefit more from leveraging from, someone else's audience versus trying to build my own audience. So, these are things that I sort of like maybe think about to decide, well, hey, Sam, like you're focused too much on what this other person is doing versus, that's a good idea. How can you, make it yours and make it fit? So I think that that's something I think about and I'm actively working on every day.
I think using our peers and other people in the profession as a inspiration and kind of a competitive push is a good thing. We just have to make sure we don't judge our success or try to compare to what perceived success is they're having. So I think a big thing that is important for us as advisors, but I think people in general to develop is like self-awareness of catching ourselves, just beginning to let that be more than, okay, they're doing that, maybe I should consider it, or maybe I can spin that my own way. That's okay. But when you start to see, man, why aren't I having that success, or why am I not on that podcast or on that TV station? Like that's where it starts to get bad. We need to catch ourselves and come back and say, hey, if so-and-so is on that, or so-and-so is receiving this award, first off, I'm happy for them. That's great for them. But that means that another good advisor is being recognized. And if we all get, it makes our whole profession get better. Like I believe we all rise together, and we just need to remind ourselves that this sometimes. But I just see, imposter syndrome gets talked about a lot, and everybody battles it, but sometimes that imposter syndrome creeps up when it shouldn't. And I just think doing content and trying to put yourself out there makes it very easy for advisors to fall victim to that. And I just think if we talk about it and we're aware of it, it'll help us kind of avoid that being a stumbling block for us, because there's enough hurdles to overcome. We don't need to bring another one to ourselves. All right, we're bumping up. I got two more questions for you. Reflecting back on your journey from MBA to getting into the profession, to setting yourselves up, to launching, what do you think your greatest struggle along the way has been?
Man, that's a good question. I would say my greatest struggle would was not necessarily knowing what to do. Like I mentioned, I didn't have a lot of people to go to. It was just kind of Googling and reading blogs and listening to podcasts and things like that. So I think my biggest struggle was, just, being uncertain about decisions that, I made.
What about the greatest victory?
The greatest victory would be making them anyway. Making those decisions anyway, because I learned a lot, from the mistakes that I've made. And believe it or not, my first website was like the cookie cutter. I forget what company I used, but it was basically a company that wrote blogs for you that was on your website, and it was very cookie cutter. And because of that experience, I learned that, well, not looking back, I'm like laughing at myself that I even thought that would have, really showed people who I was and what I wanted to build. So I definitely feel like being able to make decisions, being uncertain of the outcome, or even knowing if this is the right decision or not, or maybe not even knowing all the variables that should play a factor in the decision, and still making it anyway, and still being able to be where I am now is definitely my greatest victory. I'm not a huge risk taker. I take very calculated risks, and there were definitely times where I just sort of made gut decisions to do certain things and learned a lot from them.
All right. And the third question of this little bunch is brought to you by Leo Castelli. I just found out he's watching as well. So I want to shout out Leo
What's
too.
going
I
on,
can't leave him
guys?
out. So what would you do anything different in your course of getting to where you are today?
No, I can honestly say I wouldn't do. No, I can honestly say I wouldn't do anything differently. I mean, the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head is maybe um, having some sort of consistent income and cash flow while I was building the business would have made things tremendously easier in terms of just stress and worrying about being able to afford overhead and bringing on new clients and being able to afford certain platforms and things like that. But outside of that, I wouldn't change anything.
Okay. All right. So now we're to the final question, and I have to give all the credit to Ashby Daniels on this question. So he's told me for a long time I need to have a series of questions I ask everybody. And he actually gave me this question. So I'm going to read it word for word. This is the first week doing it. And all credit goes to Ashby. This was not my question, but I love it. And it centers around this theme about telling our story, branding, and marketing. So the essence of branding is sometimes you see, believe, or feel that is unique in your lens in terms of how we see the world of our profession around us. So what's the thing that you believe is more or less overlooked that sets you apart from the rest of our profession? What is it that you're doing? What is it, your vision, our profession, that you think you have a unique perspective on relative to everybody else?
I'll be honest. You sent me this question ahead of time, and I had a tough time really answering this question. I
So
don't
I think it's
necessarily.
good.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't think I have. I don't think I have a unique perspective per se, and from other people in our industry. What I think sets me apart is my uniqueness, right? So we talk a lot about being authentic and being genuine. There are other Black financial advisors that are out there. Like some of the things I used to hang my hat on was that, when I would go in certain spaces, not hang my hat, it was, sort of in the moment made me feel like an outcaster, but once I went out on my own, made me feel like a unicorn, was that most of the rooms that I would be in, I would be the only Black person and the youngest person in the room. And I used to view that as a disadvantage, but now I see that as an advantage. And I'm not the only Black person in the industry. I'm not the only person under 30 that has their own business in the industry. So I don't think that those things are unique, but I think, just me, Samuel Deane, I think that is the uniqueness that I bring to this industry. There are no other Samuel Deanes in this industry. The fact that I am the first college graduate, I have student loans. I'm an immigrant. I came here in 99 with my parents. I was able to sort of see my family's trajectory shift over time from when we first got here, living in like literally just in one room. That was the only thing that belonged to us in a brownstone, to our own home in Long Island. Just my experiences are what shaped me. And I think that those are the things that are unique in this industry that I bring to the table.
I think that's perfect. Like from the outsider, one thing I would say that makes you different from other advisors today is that you have a clear vision. Like it's tough. We think about our peers, and it's becoming more and more common for advisors to have a niche and focus in. But if we look at the whole profession, like if we're competing against everybody, like most advisors aren't that focused. So I think the unique perspective you have is you're confident in yourself. You know who you are. A lot of people don't know, and you know who you want to help. But then I think what separates you is your life story, your life experience, as you just described it, offers you a perspective on money and balancing all these things that I can't offer because I didn't experience that. And what's going to end up happening is through your storytelling and through you being you, people who appreciate that perspective, maybe come from the same journey, are going to be attracted to that because you understand them, and you're going to be able to know where they're coming from and what their goals and wishes are because you've traveled the same road. So I think your answer was beautiful and perfect.
Thank you.
I'll ask Ashby if he thought that was a good one, since that was his question, but I think it was great. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Closing thoughts. Nothing major except keep being the amazing advisor and friend that you are, man. I appreciate you and everything. Yeah, you've done so far for me, and just for the and not just for me, but for the industry as well. You know, I'm not the only person that you've helped. I'm sure that everyone on the FinTwit family can attest to your character and just how good of a person you are and how willing you're how much you're willing to help and want to see, you know, the best from this industry and push other advisors to be their best. And so just continue being you, man. And if anyone's looking for any sort of consulting or advice in how they can become better advisors and build better businesses to serve their clients, Justin is by far the best person to go to from personal,
Well,
from personal experiences.
I appreciate that. I think I'm gonna have to caveat that, like, these podcasts can't be compliments to me. Like, this is all about you. But I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But I mean, the only reason I'll keep that in is, one of my missions, and I talk about mission and purpose with RLS, with my clients, and driving that is, I really do want to see our profession be better, have more respect, and do better. And I think that the only way that happens is by, highlighting the good advisors and getting them found, so more people can find the Samuel Deanes of the world and have good experiences, build that generational wealth that changes their life. And if we have more people doing that, more found, then our profession can only go up. So that is a big mission of mine. And I don't know whether or not podcasts like this help. I think it does. So I appreciate the kind words, but this has been fun. I've really enjoyed our friendship and relationship. So it's really easy. So like I said, I'm very glad that you sent that cold DM, and I'm not gonna lie, that after the first call, it's like, this is somebody I want to keep on talking to. And because what I don't think people realize is, I don't necessarily consider us having a mentor-mentee relationship, but I'm senior to you because I've been in the business longer. I'm older. So you would think that all of the benefit from our conversations is you, but I get so much out of my conversations with other advisors, and, the ideas that come from you, the inspiration, like it's good for everybody. So I would encourage advisors out there, if you have younger advisors or job changers or whoever it might be, reaching out, carve out time to talk to these people, because you're going to help good people succeed, but you're also going to get a lot of benefit out of it as well that you would never think. And I just tell that from experience. So with that, we'll wrap up. So Samuel, I appreciate you taking the time on a Friday afternoon to talk about your journey, share, the good, the bad, the ugly. There wasn't a lot of bad or ugly for you, which is very fortunate. But I think that's the preparation and the focus you had. So I think the takeaway would be as prepared, be as focused as possible before you make this change, to help eliminate as many of the headaches that you might hear other people having. It's still not easy, still a lot of hard work, but it is doable. This man here has done it. So appreciate the time, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the Advisor of Tomorrow newsletter, head over to justincastelli.io/newsletter. Every other Monday it comes out. So if you're listening to this today on Monday and you haven't got that newsletter, go subscribe now. And with that, everybody have a great week or weekend if you're watching this Friday, and we'll see you in the next episode.